Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the America's All-In U.S. Climate Action Continues program today. My name is Lisa Jacobson. I'm the president of the Business Council for Sustainable Energy, and I'm very privileged to be serving as your moderator today. It's wonderful to see so many of you here in the USA Climate Pavilion. We're thrilled to have you, and I know we will be having an inspiring and substantive conversation. Over 100 U.S. leaders have traveled to Brazil for COP30 with one unified message: the U.S. is still in. Across the country, from California to Illinois, from Phoenix to Boston, from coastal cities to rural communities, U.S. leaders are pressing forward on clean energy and energy efficiency and are eager to cooperate with international partners on ambitious climate action. Today's event will highlight the examples of climate action. These actions continue despite, and in many ways, bolstered in response to federal challenges. This coalition is powerful. Led by co-chairs Governor Gavin Newsom, Governor J.P. Pritzker, Cleveland Mayor Justin Bibb, and former EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy, it represents 2/3 of the U.S. population and 3/4 of U.S. GDP. Our panelists today will share how they're delivering real results, lowering energy costs for families, creating good-paying jobs, cutting dangerous pollution, and building more resilient communities. They represent true American leadership. Governors, commissioners, policy experts, and the private sector and innovators who are proving that ambitious climate action and economic prosperity go hand in hand. Before we hear from our live guests, I'd like to share a video message from America's All-In's managing co-chair, Gina McCarthy. Gina was the first White House National Climate Advisor and former U.S. EPA Administrator, and one of the nation's most respected voices on climate change, the environment, and public health. So let's watch a few words from Gina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gina McCarthy, managing co-chair of America is All In, and I'm thrilled that our All In team has been on the ground in Belém, literally running around, meeting with ministers and talking to press and hosting events. Todd, Trig, Nate, you have been making all of us back home very proud with your incredible hard work. In fact, all of our American colleagues in Belém have been making the voices heard and adding real value to the ongoing dialogue, while consistently reminding our international allies and friends and partners that we are and always will be all in. And I want you to know that back home, we're continuing to see record clean energy being installed across the country. Solar, batteries, grid improvements, transit investments, and pollution reductions that are making life easier and healthier, and you guessed it, more affordable. And make no mistake, it was our ongoing success at home that helped empower my fellow co-chair, Governor Gavin Newsom, to run around last week in Belém, reminding everyone about what's possible when states and cities step up, not just in our country, but obviously across the world. I myself had the privilege of being a part of the COP30 Local Leaders Forum in Rio, where we had over 100 mayors, governors, and local leaders with us. I believe it was the second largest delegation behind Brazil, and I was so happy and proud of everyone who went to Rio because we stood united. We joined together by optimism and hope, and we committed to doing everything we can to ensure that this will be the decisive decade for climate action. You know, I've been to a number of COPs, and what made this one so unique was that that we were past the point of arguing over each and every word, a comma, or a percentage point. We finally have solutions and technologies, products and practices that can deliver a clean energy future. We just need to grab them and put them to work now. In both Belém and Rio, we were careful to not downplay just how tough it is right now back home in our country. But because of the graciousness of our international colleagues and friends, we were able to stand together, to forge partnerships, and to find creative financing opportunities to lower costs across the world. You know, at the end of the Local Leaders Forum, we released a joint declaration from more than 14,000 cities and towns and states and regions and provinces all across every continent, as well as the United Nations. And it is our firm hope that this declaration has opened the door to allowing local leaders into the COP process. We need to hear the voices of local leaders who we know are committed to helping countries achieve their climate goals through implementation and a just transition, and to ensuring there's a pipeline of bankable local projects to channel climate finance and advance multi-level action and collaboration. This agenda is exactly what we need to inspire change from the bottom up, which I would argue has been the only real and lasting way that change has ever happened. So I hope our efforts together have inspired you, and I myself have no doubt that local leaders are already active in turning our stated commitments into results that improve lives, lower cost, create jobs, advance clean air and water, and make our neighborhoods safer and healthier again. So I can't thank all of you enough for spending so much time and so much energy to bring excitement on the ground in Brazil, the way we're feeling it back at home. Thanks so much for everything you're doing. Safe travels.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Hear, hear, Gina. Well said. Now I'm pleased to introduce Todd Stern, one of America's most experienced international climate policy leaders and a high-level champion for America is All In. Todd will set the stage for our live conversation. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you so much. Can you guys sort of hear me? Okay. I'm going to be short and to the point because we've got some good panelists that you'll want to hear from. The basic message, if you get right down to it, the basic message of America's All In is that climate might be dead in the Trump White House and in the Trump administration, but it's very much alive and well, and action is being undertaken all over the country. Hello? Is that better? Okay. I don't have to repeat what I said. It's not that important. This organization had its initial incarnation back the first time Trump did this in 2017. And it was really an incredible response at that point. Trump gave his heinous, ridiculous speech in the Rose Garden announcing that he was going to leave Paris. And in a matter of days, you had the original incarnation of this group, We Are Still In, but also hundreds and thousands of people from heads of universities and businesses and NGOs, governors, mayors, who all came forward literally 3 days from the time that Trump spoke, to sign a declaration that said we are still in, and that's where that original name came from. And then it grew and continued to work. There was another organization called America's Pledge that started to undertake a very important piece of work, which is how can we count up all the emission reductions that happen in the United States on account of states and localities and cities and so forth. And so that was America's Pledge, and then America's Pledge merged with We Are Still In and became America is Still In. You heard from Gina, who's as good as they come, and the work that we are doing here. We've had meetings, I think, with around 20 different countries and entities, carrying this message and explaining what it is that we are doing. There are, as I think you've already heard, there's some 2/3 of the U.S. population is covered by states, cities, etc., that are part of this coalition. 3/4 of our GDP, and so it's a powerful group. I think we have an expert here with us, Nate Holtman, who's going to take you through some of the numbers, which are extremely impressive and extremely heartening to hear what we can do in terms of emissions. But Nate's the expert. I will let him do that. And I'm going to just pass it on now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Todd. I'd now like to invite the panelists to come up, and I'll introduce them to you. And I will, just for the panel's purposes, I will sit to my left over there on the far seat, but you don't need to worry. Please come and take whichever seat you'd like. So I'd like to welcome Sarah Swig, Deputy Cabinet Secretary and Senior Advisor on Climate to Governor Newsom. Welcome, Sarah. Nate Holtman, Director of the Center for Global Sustainability at the University of Maryland. I'm a Maryland resident. Go Terps. There we go. Sam Cho, Commissioner for the Port of Seattle. Welcome, Sam. And Helen Walter Terranoni, Director of Global Climate Policy for Trane Technologies, also a Vice Chair of the Business Council for Sustainable Energy. Welcome, Helen. Okay. So why don't you take this microphone since I have one. You don't need to turn it on.
You can't run away from me.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Really so pleased to have all of your expertise participating in this panel and this conversation this afternoon. Sarah, I would love to start with you, if that works. So, California has continued to advance some of the most ambitious climate policies in the world. How are you filling the gap left by federal policy uncertainty and collaborating with other subnationals and international partners to scale these policies and increase climate action globally?
Thank you, and thank you for having us. You know, it's an honor for the governor to co-chair America's All In and to participate in this panel today, because I think this panel, the coalition partners, the people in this room right now are really representing the backbone of U.S. climate leadership, which is as important now as ever. I mean, Governor Newsom was here in Brazil, here at COP last week, and he was remarking publicly how the United States couldn't even send a note taker. I think that really underscores the moment that we're in is really, you know, remarkable. But I think that comment, the lack of U.S. leadership participating here, shows why this coalition is so important in this moment. And, you know, thanks to these coalitions, as we just heard about, we had over 100 American leaders here in Brazil joining over 14,000 cities, subnational leaders, to share the message that we are still in and that subnational leadership can help meet these national adaptation plans, NDCs. California is now the 4th largest economy in the world, and we have a very significant role to play, an opportunity to help fill that gap in the wake of federal leadership. So, you know, the governor's message while he was at COP is very simple. You all have probably heard it, but that California continues to be a stable, reliable partner, both for our fellow states and our alliances and for our international partners, who I'm, you know, happy to talk about in a little bit. And I think that is also really important as a stable place for investment, especially in the wake of federal funding challenges, to help leverage that private investment, knowing that you have a stable market in California and our coalition partners. So why are we all in? You know, I think it's important to note that climate progress has never depended on one single institution. We are experiencing whiplash, and you know, a theme that I've picked up on from our conversations here and talking to friends over the dinner table, colleagues, you know, I think there's a lot of remarking about how the last 11 months people have been surprised at how quickly the Trump administration has been able to dismantle institutions, roll back progress, and there's this sense that the administration is more sophisticated this time around. But I think that misses the point that we are actually more sophisticated this time around. You know, under the last America's All In coalition, of course, we were we were surprised. But now we are organized. I mean, look at how many people are in this room, this panel. We are better prepared. Since 2017, California has reduced emissions. As I said, we've grown to be the 4th largest economy, and we're showing that our progress will endure despite these political cycles. So to answer your specific question, how are we working to fill that gap? We have worked to embed climate in literally everything we do in California, not just in our environmental agencies, but our housing agencies, transit, business. We are working with our UC system to fund the next generation of climate workforce. We are, we had our tribal secretary here for the last week. She participated in many panels here, and she has been sharing the message of California's work with tribal governments to build energy sovereignty, to invest in land back, water conservation, wildlife conservation, our salmon work. We are working with businesses. The governor participated in a climate investor symposium in Sao Paulo to share the message, of course, that we continue to be a stable place for investment. We are working with our hospitals to help them prepare for extreme heat illness, which is a newer issue, for the impacts of wildfire smoke, things that maybe we didn't have to think about previously. And I think all of that just goes to build the climate architecture that we are better prepared for this time around. And if I could just share some of our successes really quickly, we're so proud that all of that has led to California's grid is cleaner than ever. We run on clean energy for 100% clean energy for most days of the year. In Q3, 1 in 3 vehicles sold in California was zero emission. That is a huge milestone, especially given the impact that passenger vehicles and transportation plays on our emissions in California. Our grid scale battery storage, we've had reliability problems in the past, and as we continue to invest and scale up renewables, the role of energy storage to help make renewables, really come to life. We've grown 2,100% battery storage increase since the governor came into office in 2019. So those are just, some of the examples. Also, we just extended our Cap and Invest program through to 2045, really sending that long-term market signal. And a part of the reason we've been able, to have all of these successes, and also a theme of this COP, is we don't just set goals. We don't just set our carbon neutrality targets, our zero-emission vehicle targets. We actually back it up with legislation. We create binding targets, and then we're able to actually implement and do that work. And I think we've shown that as we set these targets, we're actually prepared to deliver them. And that has really opened an avenue for us to partner with international partners, really in the wake of our federal leadership. It has been really tremendous to see how much excitement there is from countries around the world to partner with California, to exchange in two-way dialogues, exchange of information. We've partnered with dozens of countries on memorandums of understanding. We partnered with Nigeria, Brazil, the state of Pará, with China, both at the provincial level and the national level. And these are real, we get questions like, are these just symbols? And they are symbolic, but they are actually leading to real world outcomes in that two-way exchange of information. We've been able to share what we're doing on zero emission vehicles, how we design our Cap and Invest, our carbon market programs, and we're also able to hear from other countries about what they're doing and how we can make our programs better. And I think, a theme that we hear is when the United States isn't exerting that leadership, it really just creates an opportunity for China to exert that leadership, and we just lose ground on domestic manufacturing and clean energy, and that's really an exciting opportunity for states to sort of fill that gap. So, our goals for the next few years, I think, are really clear. We're going to continue those international partnerships, continue to work with America's All In to expand our coalitions, to strengthen them, to ensure that as we go forward, the climate architecture is so baked in that even in the absence of federal leadership, we'll still be able to reach our climate goals. So I think it's about to.
The rain is coming.
I mean, we'll see. I was on a panel here the other day, and we had some water coming through. So we'll see if we make it.
So far, so good. Okay, that was excellent. Thank you so much. I mean, one of the other points I would add is, yes, we are better organized. Our policy foundation is much stronger, especially at the state and local level. But technology, evolution, innovation, and costs have gone down. We are in a very different place. And I think that was definitely reflected in the local leaders forum, is that we weren't just talking aspirationally, we had real proof on the ground. And clearly California has been a leader across the board. So thank you, Sarah. So Nate, very interested to learn more about your recent analysis. So share with us, how and where can cities and states keep the U.S. in line with Paris Agreement goals? And where are you seeing the biggest drivers of U.S. emissions reductions at the subnational level?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you, Lisa, for... All right. Okay, so thank you, Lisa, for moderating. I also want to thank Managing Co-Chair Gina McCarthy for her typically very inspiring comments, and also for her role in helping us stay focused on that positive commitment, the tenacity that we are all bringing to the community right now. And I thank her for that, and thank Todd Stern for being the all-in champion. It's a real privilege to be here with you, Todd, and as one of the architects of the Paris Agreement, an institution, an approach that we're all committed to here in this room, and that I think that the work we're doing demonstrates the value of Paris's call for an all-of-society approach to delivering ambition and action. I'm wondering also, first of all, how many people in the room are from the United States? Okay. And so for those of you from the United States, I want to also say thank you to you for doing the work you're doing. And I also note that there are a number of people who are not from the United States in the room, and I want to say thank you to you for being here, for engaging with us, and for being part of this global community of action, because it's just critical right now for us in the United States to have your partnership. We value that, we welcome that deeply, and I think that it's times like this where being creative together is how we're going to kind of get through this challenging moment that's not only in the US but also globally, as we're working on solving these issues simultaneously and multilaterally together. Okay, so thanks for all of that. Thanks to you. So let me actually then turn to the actual question. So, so since about 2017, we at the Center for Global Sustainability have partnered with America's All In its various incarnations to, as Todd mentioned, understand the opportunities and also the impact of how subnational leadership, subnational action in the United States, and frankly, sometimes outside the United States as well, we see that happening too, can deliver on our ambitious goals. How can they help? How can we help scope higher ambition for our country, for our subnational entities, and then how can we use that process to then deliver on implementation in those different places? And what we're seeing is that we have gone through several of these cycles in the U.S., as we all know, and sort of have exercised those activities pretty vigorously. We just heard several wonderful examples from our leading light of California, which is an inspiration to all of us. But that kind of work does happen across the country in different ways, because there's different political situations in different places. And so the question then becomes, like, how do we think about the aggregation of all those actions? What are the opportunities, and what do they then lead to in terms of aggregate outcomes for economic outcomes, for benefits, for health, and for emissions trajectories, which is, of course, a critical part of why we're doing this. So just want to share a couple of framing thoughts. So first, one thing very important to note about the United States, like many other countries, we have a federalized constitutional structure. What that means is that, yes, the national government has a lot of policy authority, so let's see that, But at the same time, so too do states and cities and other local and subnational governments. And that is something that our leaders have grabbed onto very firmly and are really driving ahead. We heard about the Local Leaders Forum, for example, today, and there's much leadership happening using those policy authorities vested in those levels of government. States, for example, have a significant authority on electricity and building codes, for example. There's many examples, but those are two big ones. Cities, for example, have a lot of authority on transportation, EV infrastructure, charging, waste, these types of things. More details, of course, available if anybody wants, but those are some examples of how our system works. And together, that actually can matter quite a bit. So, for example, just a few sort of backgrounders, like in the Northeast, we have 10 Northeast states that are part of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. They've reduced their emissions by collectively 50% since 2005. The 24 U.S. Climate Alliance states, with leading governors, including California and my own governor of Maryland and others, have reduced their emissions by 24% since 2005 and increased their economies by 34% in GDP since 2005. And it's not just in sort of more forward-leaning climate states, it's also in red states too. Kentucky, for example, just is permitting and is building a 210 megawatt solar facility, which will be one of the biggest clean energy facilities in the eastern United States. So when you aggregate all of those things together, what are the different policies happening today? What are the policies that might be grabbed and pushed forward in the future, whether from leading states like California, or maybe states that might not be doing it purely for, say, climate reasons, but because it's inexpensive, inexpensive electricity that's easily deployed. What we see is that there's real opportunities for driving down emissions in the U.S. that's already happening. So, for example, our analysis that we've heard about a little bit earlier today shows that even without federal re-engagement in 2028, we hope that might be not true, but that's sort of the scenario, that even without federal re-engagement, the current actions that are happening in states, cities, and businesses, plus enhancing those actions using those policy authorities we talked about just a minute ago, could deliver reductions in sort of the mid 40% range by 2035. Okay, so that's possibly better than you might have thought. I don't know where your thinking was, but that's actually continuing to drive down emissions pretty significantly over roughly 35%, which would just be current policies by 2035. But then if we have, in fact, enhanced subnational action in non-leading states, and we have federal re-engagement after 2028, we could see emissions trajectories go down to, say, even the mid-50s, say 56% below 2005 levels by 2035, which is what our analysis with America's All In has shown. And that's available. Anybody who's interested, you can find it online or talk to me and we can get you that. One important aspect of this, and I'll kind of conclude on this, is that this is not just an emissions story. It's a story about economic benefits and impacts on sharing those benefits broadly. Another analysis we did recently shows that high ambition climate pathway could deliver reduced deaths from particulate matter in nearly every county in the United States, both urban and rural across the United States, nearly every single county, with 1/3 of counties in the United States experience a 5% reduction in health-related mortality because of particulate matter, and 2/3 of counties experiencing a 1/3 of counties experiencing a 10% reduction, and 2/3 of counties experiencing a 5% reduction in mortality. So basically these benefits are broadly shared. There's higher affordability, and we're seeing right now that the easiest way to deploy clean technology, or the easiest way to serve new demand from electricity, is through clean technology and solar. And one of the final things I'll just wrap on is that what we're seeing in the United States is not just a U.S. story. And I know, having heard about it at the Local Leaders Forum, having talked about it, listened to many of our partners internationally, this is the kind of thing we're also seeing globally. And that global embrace of the importance of those subnational actions is something that's very critical for our collective ability to reach our global and shared climate goals. So with that, I'm going to say thank you and turn back over to Lisa.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent. So much really important information that you shared. So yes, let's make sure that we get that available to the audience. Sam, love to invite you into the conversation. Ports are on the front lines of decarbonization. What steps is the Port of Seattle taking to accelerate electrification, clean fuels, and other maritime climate strategies? And how are these international partnerships helping accelerate your decarbonization efforts?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, thank you for having me, and thanks for the question. You know, yesterday I was on a panel with Secretary of Agriculture Karen Ross, and she made this insightful comment that the lack of federal leadership on climate change or sustainability has a counterbalance on the subnational level. And then I piled on and said it's not just a counterbalance, it's actually become an accelerant. Because for us at the Port of Seattle, we've actually doubled down on our efforts around sustainability and getting to net zero by 2040. And if you look at some of the states that were always very bullish on net zero, whether it's California, the state of Washington, or Oregon, we've all kind of doubled down. And the reason is simple. The reason is because this mission to get to net zero was never really something that was driven by the federal government. So the absence of the federal government and their drive to do this does not negate or cool down our effort, right? In politics, we have a saying, all politics is local, right? Well, it turns out all sustainability projects are local too, right? So whether it's habitat mitigation or installing onshore power or building a small modular reactor in your state, these are all local projects, right? These were never, there was some federal funding involved at one point, right? But the reality was that the vast majority of the work has always been done on the subnational level. And so for us, it's been an accelerant in the sense that, in an ironic way, without the federal involvement, we've just been kind of doing it on our own at a faster pace, right? And an example of this is actually the Green Corridor that we have with South Korea. Now, the South Korea Pacific Northwest Green Corridor is with the port of Busan, Ulsan, Seattle, and Tacoma. And you're trying to decarbonize the entire cargo route between our region and their region. One of the challenges we had with the Green Corridor, even prior to the Trump administration, quite frankly, was that in Korea, the ports are governed on a federal level by the central government, right? In the US, port authorities are completely independent or governed on a local level, right? So LA and Long Beach are governed by the city of LA Long Beach. The Port of Seattle is a special purpose government. We don't report to any governing authority. But in Korea, the ports report to their federal government. So whenever there was any quote-unquote progress that we needed to make on green corridors, the Korean ports needed to report to their federal government, which would then go to the State Department, and then the State Department would have to then relay that to us on the local level, right? So it created this circuitous, really bureaucratic process. Well, with the Trump administration completely cutting off talks on green corridors, there was this impetus between the ports to say, you know what, let's cut everything out, and why don't we, the 4 ports involved in this green corridor, just coordinate on our own? So before we came to COP, we signed an MOU between the Port of Seattle, Tacoma, Busan, and Ulsan. The 4 ports signed an MOU to continue this work on the green corridor. The federal governments weren't involved at all, right? Not to say that we don't welcome their involvement, but we were able to cut out a layer of bureaucracy, so to speak, by going direct, right? And so this is what I mean by saying that, oh, we're still committed, we're doubled down, and some of the absence of the federal government has, become an accelerant. Now, with that said, we would still love the federal money, right? So that has been the toughest challenge for ports and other infrastructure projects around these sustainability projects, because as much as we want to move forward with them, the funding piece has been really difficult with the IRA and the other infrastructure bills that have been dismantled. And so we are steadfast in the commitment. It was never about what the federal government was telling us. It was always about our values, our principles, and our mission as an organization. And we're looking for new ways. I think if there's anything we've learned during the last 9 months, whether it's on trade policy or climate policy, it is that if the United States withdraws, the world doesn't just pause and wait. They're going to leave us behind, right? That's just a fact, whether it's on tariffs or trade, whether it's on climate policies, right? So if the federal government isn't going to keep up, it's up to us on a subnational level to take that mantle and run with it.
What a great example. I mean, that is really inspiring. That gives me a lot of hope. All right. Thank you for sharing that, Sam. Okay, Helen, welcome. We have Helen Walter Terranoni here with us with Train Technologies, and I was just representing the business community. How are U.S. businesses engaging in the response to the climate crisis, and what is Train Technologies doing specifically?
Lisa, I'm going to start, if it's okay, talking about the cycle of virtue, we have heard multiple on-ramps to this upward cycle of virtue, right? There are cost savings for people. There are air quality benefits for people. There's lower risk of heat and wildfire for people. There's a lot of benefits beyond just emissions reductions and mitigation around introduction of these technologies. And when we as companies think about politics, we have seen political cycles up and down, come and go. We don't invest based on a political cycle. Our investment cycle is much longer than 4 years, and some of our technologies take 5, 10, 20 years to come to fruition and be commercialized. And we don't invest based on politics, right? We look at the benefits to society overarchingly, full picture, because at the end of the day, our customers are volunteers, and they buy what they want to buy, and we can't make them pick the thing we want to pick or based on politics or even our own preferences, right? And so we need to bring benefits to them, many times that are multifaceted as on-ramps to this cycle of virtue. So Lisa, companies, all of the companies at the Business Council for Sustainable Energy, they're making investment decisions based on bigger picture choices, based on trade-offs and based on long-term projections around things. So I just wanted to make mention of that to kind of wrap some of the comments that we've all made. So Trane Technologies is the biggest heating and cooling company in the world. We employ, at last count, 45,000 people, 25 manufacturing sites in the US, 16 in Europe. I don't even know how many in Asia. We have 4,000 technicians, so if we think about workforce training and so on, and distribution. So we kind of sit in the entire value chain in our space. We continue with our 1.5 degree and net zero goals, as well as a 2030 goal to reduce a gigaton of emissions from our customers' use of our products, right? So that's a lot about energy use. So at Trane Technologies, we spend a lot of time looking at innovation. We try to be ready with that next technology, so when society wants it, when our customers want it, it's available. We recently acquired BrainBox, which is, as you can imagine, that's kind of looking at demand response and controls of systems. And if we think about, so I'm going to talk about this cycle of virtue again, right? So if we think about the grid, the electricity grid, right, it benefits all of us. Energy demand is growing all over the world. I think I heard a number in a panel with someone from India that said like 130 megawatts that they need in the next 5 years just for cooling, just for additional cooling for people that don't have access to that. So if we think about all of that investments that is needed for the grid, if we can find ways to reduce that, so I'm going to talk some really hard technology here, so ready for this, okay? Electricity demands peak at different times in the day, right? So it gets really, really hot out, and if you're using air conditioning at that moment, demand peaks, right? Around 5, 6, 7 o'clock when people come home, crank up that air conditioning, start using appliances around their homes. In the wintertime, if you live in a cold place, that peak happens kind of early in the morning when it gets really cold out, right? And the sun hasn't really come up to help us out. So, load shifting, so cutting those peaks cuts the amount of investment that we need in the overarching grid. And so some of the things that we need to think about are how do we, get that cycle of virtue going, investment in ways to shift those peaks, investing in energy storage and as well as energy savings, if we think about energy efficiency, because those little things that we can each individually do, and the choices that we make as users of energy, those are things that benefit all of society, and all those virtuous things that we talked about around cost, as well as air quality and so on, all of those benefits are for everyone. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about, Lisa, as we think about these next moments and these next years, because we didn't invest for the last moment. We're not investing for this moment. We're investing for the long term.
No, that's so important. Well, we have a few minutes for some questions. I'd love to take some. So you're number one. I see number two. So we'll have to watch the time a little bit. But if you do ask a question, I ask that because we have a live audience as well as we're going to record this. So please introduce yourself. And I'm going to take 2 questions at least at a time, and then we will have the panel answer them. So welcome.
Hey, I'm Yulia Gergiu with Carbon Pulse, and I want to know what you guys think that subnationals can do to encourage U.S. corporates to be more vocal. They haven't stopped doing their initiatives, but they are a lot quieter because there's a noted apprehension about standing out as an opponent to the Trump administration.
Should I say my question now? Okay. My name is Elani, and I'm from the University of Montana. And I'm associated with a lot of U.S. youth. And I think that youth in the United States are a little bit disappointed right now with where climate policy is heading. And we're also really excited to see what you guys bring to the table. And I was wondering, what mistakes has your group made in the past when it comes to climate policy? Maybe it relates to bipartisanship. And what have you learned in recent times to correct those mistakes? I'd be especially interested in what you've learned from being here at COP and learning from leaders from the Global South.
Those are 2 excellent questions. I think I'll just start with the second one for a moment. I think one of the biggest things we've learned is what Helen was describing, is that a lot of us know what these benefits are, but we haven't necessarily, maybe we did 15, 20 years ago, we haven't talked about them with their broad benefits and really how they help people enough. And with technology costs coming down so dramatically, not just in renewables, we're talking about so many new technologies, and digitalization is just taken all these technologies and given us so much potential to do more for people. We just haven't really described that virtuous cycle enough, and that's the opportunity for us all. So we had 2 really good questions. Who would like to start?
You want me to talk about business? Okay. Yeah, I think, Lisa, I couldn't agree with you more. This, one of the mistakes that we've made from my perspective is allowing the narrative to become politicized. The good outcomes for society are the good outcomes for society, and the politics of that don't need to play out in this, right? We need to think about what's good for ourselves and what our customers want, right? And then from having businesses speak up, I think that, again, we need to depoliticize these messages and talk about, what our customers want and our long-term investments and the benefits to society. And I think that that way forward, helps us to all continue to row in the same direction.
So I want to tackle this first question you had asked about how to talk about this issue with corporations and businesses, because as a port, we mainly deal with the private sector, right? And I think generally, the piece of this conversation around climate change and sustainability that is missing is the argument that it's just good for business, period, right? And I think a certain wing of the pro-climate, camp talks a lot about yes, we need to reduce emissions and it's the right thing to do, and it's all correct, right? I'm not, poo-pooing what we say on the left, but you look at what some of the conservative states are doing, whether it's small modular reactors in the Southeast, in the Sun Belt region, in Tennessee, or the biggest exporter of certain fuels like methanol, it's Texas, the biggest wind farms. And Texas is by no means a champion for sustainability. So why do these states do this? Why do they make these investments in what you would think is not a business that they would be interested in? It's because it's good for business. It's because they figured out, right, how to actually make this make sense from a business perspective. And I think that's part of what's missing from the narrative that is promoted on the further left, is that, a huge problem that we have in the state of Washington or in a lot of the blue states is that it's just the pro forma doesn't make sense on a lot of these projects when it comes to an ROI perspective, right? Like you need heavy government subsidies in order for these projects to pencil out. It's just a reality, right? And maybe that's the point and that's what we want, but there are other areas, you know, in the country where like that's not necessarily the case, where there are certain regulatory barriers that don't exist, right, that allow for things to get done faster, smoother, and on a cheaper basis, right? So all this to say, like, yes, you're right in that people are not, businesses and corporations aren't talking about sustainability as outwardly as they used to because of this administration. It's the same thing with DEI. No one talks about DEI anymore, even though everyone is kind of doing it in stealth anyway, right? But the reality is that those companies do it because they know that it's good for business, right? If it wasn't good for business, no one would do it in this time, right? And as you heard from someone in the private sector, they don't make investments based on political cycles or four-year cycles, right? They make business decisions, right? And so that's the piece of the narrative that we're missing here is that how is this good for businesses, right? How is this a good business proposition? And how do we make the ROI, you know, stomachable for these corporations?
Good. Well, thank you both for those good questions. Let's keep asking good questions. It's that kind of time we have to be thinking about this stuff. So I'm going to maybe address the second question a little bit more. Just taking one step back, sort of this is what we've learned, how we've learned, like how to do better. We have to learn how to do better. I think all of us here would acknowledge that. The Paris Agreement actually set up a very important process for us to both set big goals for ourselves and then learn how to do better as we're kind of going through these cycles over time. It's set ambition, be transparent, be honest with each other about where we're going, learn from those maybe shortfalls if we have them, and try to do better at the next phase. And that cycle is critical to what we're doing in the US, but it's also critical to what's happening globally. You also asked about what do we learn from COP30, and I think that one of the things I'm still a little bit fuzzy on what multi-ROW is, but like I think I have some sense of it, and I think that I would like to learn more. And I think that one thing we can see by looking around and listening to what multi-ROW is actually not that far off from what we're trying to do in the United States, and what I think will be a very important part of doing this work better in the future. And that includes, as we were hearing, you know, from Lisa, how we can listen, how we can communicate, and actually learning from the people of our countries, of our subnational governments, you know, within our state, within our region, within our city, within our local community. Having a larger engagement of those communities is a critical step of doing better. And I think that is embodied, as I understand it, in the multi-ROW concept. And I know that COP30 was supposed to be a broader COP for a broader set of, you know, communities that's not just the negotiating space and all that. So I think, like, let's embrace that and think about how we can do that better in the US as well. And one of just a couple of small examples where, you know, when like our sort of America's All In and you know, associated work we've done at UMD, we work a lot with our state of Maryland, for example. As part of that, we sort of did some work to try to do listening sessions with the government to try to like listen and learn from the different parts of our state. We didn't do it like, you know, perfectly. It was only a little bit. It could have been done a lot more, but it was actually very fruitful in terms of the ability to engage with other communities. America's All In did a large set of consultations in 2024 about what we think we might be able to do in the United States with businesses, with all the different constituencies in America's All In. I think there were 24 different engagements of some, you know, consultative processes that were run. Is 24 enough? Not nearly, but it's like that kind of approach of like doing those engagements and then using our subnational leadership, those policy processes that already exist in those areas. Like California already does it, but as we kind of learn to tell those stories better, what are the benefits? How do we get people engaged? I think that is a place where we have learned that we have done some things. We've gotten sort of partly there, but we can do a lot better. And I'd invite the youth to help us with that in the next phases.
Terrific. Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, I would just to layer on to how climate action is good for business, just an important story from California, I think, is, Governor Reagan created California Air Resources Board, and we started to really address local air pollution, in part because the smog in Los Angeles was so bad that the business community was going to the governor and saying, we can't do business here. It is so unhealthy. You can't see down the street. And I just think we in a sense, the bipartisanship, we've strayed far from that. But it is a good reminder that California's climate action, all of the work that we've done really went back to an ask from the business community. And so I think it's sort of an answer to both of the questions about how we talk about climate. Of course, probably most of us in this room, we love the birds and the bees, we love our wildlife. In California, we love our sea otters, but it's really important not to shy away from those issues, but to talk about climate action as an economic opportunity. What does it mean to build domestic supply chains? What does it mean to build clean energy jobs? All of this, if we can source it locally, really will create such an economic opportunity, and we are seeing other countries really exert more leadership there. So I think those two questions are great. And then this is an adage we hear a lot in politics and public service, but one that Governor Newsom quotes a lot, which is, if you want to go fast, you go alone, and if you want to go far, you go together. And that is why this coalition is so important. I started working for Governor Newsom 2 months ago, not really knowing what my day-to-day would be like. And really, it's a lot of coalition building. We meet with America's All In, the U.S. Climate Alliance, our international partnerships, the Under 2 Coalition, other international, domestic, the Pacific Coast Collaborative with Canada, Oregon, Washington, and California, to really make sure that our coalitions are strong and that our policies will be durable. So I think it's just really important as we go forward to expand the tent, to talk about economic issues and to ensure that we're bringing other people along with us.
Okay, so we have like 2 minutes left. So I'd love to just go down the line, parting thought to leave the group, and then I'm going to bring up our closing speaker, Trig Talley. So rapid fire, starting with Helen.
Me first, really? Okay. Just first of all, again, thank you for participating in this conversation. Industry, again, we invest for long-term cycles. This is not for this moment. This is for the long term. The benefits are multifaceted, and that's why customers want what we make. So multifaceted benefits for all of society, and thanks for being here.
Man, you're really putting us on the spot here. There's a saying that my colleagues and I have been using these days to describe the kind of the times that we have today, and that's chaos is a ladder. I don't know if you know that. And within the context of the work that we're doing here, there's a lot of chaos in this space, right? But I do think that in that chaos, like I said earlier, there's a willingness for folks to work, to be double motivated, more motivated than ever, in fact. Right? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So this administration doing what it is only motivates us even more to push back, to fight harder, to look for that ladder in the midst of the chaos. So I encourage everyone to take advantage of this moment, find the silver linings and keep pushing. And hopefully we'll be back here next year with a lot more positive things to report out on.
All right. So, point one, it's a tough time in the U.S. and globally for the work we're doing. Point number two, as we recognize that, your work does matter in the United States. It is making a difference. And for those outside the U.S., the work you're doing, of course, is also making a difference, and certainly in partnering with us. And point number three is, at times like this, listening, learning, communicating, and being creative is really the thing that we have to solve the problems together.
Thank you. Yeah, I think for California, it's really, simple, just to reinforce what I said earlier and what the governor's message has been, which is that California is not turning its back. We continue to be a stable, reliable partner. We've always cared about climate action. That's not going to change. We wish we had a federal partner but we don't. So we just continue to go forward and build these coalitions. So I think we do have a lot to be optimistic about. As Gina said, the decade of implementation, we have real success stories to share. We should do more of that. And we're just going to continue to do the work that we've always done, regardless of who's in Washington, D.C.
Well, that really just a fantastic panel. Let's give everybody a round of applause to the panel. Stay here, though. If you don't mind, stay here, because I'm going to, excuse me, introduce our closing speaker. Are you going to go to the podium, or would you like to go? Yeah. Yes, it's invisible. Okay, to close out our event today, I'm pleased to introduce Trig Talley. Trig is a special representative to America is All In and brings decades of experience in international climate diplomacy. He's been a key architect of the U.S. climate policy and now works to ensure that American subnational leaders have the support and connections they need to drive global climate progress. Thanks, Trig, for your closing reflections.
Well, thank you. And I just want to thank this very inspiring and exciting group here who are representing a much broader group of their own constituents and collectively this very broad coalition. And I'm becoming a cheerleader for all the coalitions that are part of America's All In. Every one of these presentations I go to underscore to me just how broad and deep this effort is. And as Nate said, this is a tough time. In a lot of ways, at the federal level, it's a tougher time than it was before. But it is very clear there is enormous momentum in the United States. And that momentum derives from the fact that people have been at this for a while now. So we have deep expertise that spans so many areas of the United States across so many sectors. And I just wanted to note how broad our coalition is. So if you think about who these people represent, we have at least 350 local governments that are part of the of America's All In addition to our 24 states. We have thousands of businesses who join Helen and train, who are doing the same kinds of things. We have 851 faith groups at last count, and I presented to them yesterday and heard the intensity and the passion that they bring to their work to build a grassroots support for this. We have 162 cultural institutions at last count, and we have over 400 universities and higher education institutions. As well as tribes, we have 14 tribes, and investors and others. So it's a very, very broad-based coalition. And I'm sure that every one of those would bring this kind of message to us. And I've heard over the last few days the very exciting things that are going on in a number of states and cities. So this is just very exciting. In terms of our process, the momentum is also because the transition is now one that is an affordability agenda. And so that gives us a momentum that is very difficult to resist. And so that's very exciting as well. And in terms of this process, you had mentioned, so what about this process? Everybody says we are turning to implementation. And that is absolutely the case. And I think that's an area where, what we call non-state actors or our constituencies play most actively. And so I anticipate that as the action agenda grows, that you will see many, many American institutions involved in that and supporting that effort. And that's very exciting. We don't participate in the negotiations. That's the role of the federal government. But really the locus of effort now really does move to this realm where American businesses and localities and states can really play a large role. So I'm very excited to have been a part of this for a very short time, and I see exciting things for America's All In as an organization, and also for the groups the coalitions that have been very active and are very deeply involved with their fellow constituents around the world already. So with that, thank you for coming. And we are always open for questions, consultations, and suggestions about how we can do things better. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your COP30.